Charlie Bucket was getting dressed for school. Standing by the window, he saw the huge flakes drifting slowly down out of an icy sky that was the colour of steel. By evening, it lay 4 feet deep around the tiny house, and Mr. Bucket had to dig a path from the front door to the road. After the snow, there came a freezing gale that blew for days and days without stopping. Oh, and how bitter cold it was. Everything that Charlie touched seemed to be made of ice, and each time he stepped outside the door, the wind was like a knife in his cheek. Inside the house, tiny jets of freezing air came rushing in through the sides of the windows and under the doors, and there was no place to go to escape them. The 4 old ones lay silent and huddled in their bed, trying to keep the cold out of their bones. The excitement of the golden tickets had long been forgotten. Nobody in the family gave a thought to anything else, except for the 2 vital problems of trying to keep warm and trying to have enough to eat. There was something about very cold weather that gives one an enormous appetite. Most of us find ourselves beginning to crave rich, steaming stews and hot apple pies, and all kinds of delicious, warming dishes. And because we're all a great deal luckier than we realise, we usually get what we want, or near enough. But Charlie Bucket never got what he wanted because the family couldn't afford it. And as the cold weather drew on and on, he became ravenously and desperately hungry. Both bars of chocolate, the birthday one and the one Grandpa Joe had bought, had long since been nibbled away, and all he had now were those thin, cabbagey meals 3 times a day. Then all at once, the meals became even thinner. The reason for this was that the toothpaste factory, the place where Mr. Bucket worked, suddenly went bust and had to close down. Quickly, Mr. Bucket tried to get another job, but he had no luck. In the end, the only way in which he managed to earn a few pennies was by shoveling snow in the streets. But it wasn't enough to even buy a quarter of the food that the 7 people needed. The situation became desperate. Breakfast was a single slice of bread for each person now, and lunch was maybe half a boiled potato. Slowly but surely, everyone in the house began to starve, and every day little Charlie Bucket, trudging through the snow on his way to school, would have to pass Willy Wonka's giant chocolate factory, and every day as he came near to it, he would lift up his small pointed nose high in the air and sniff the wonderful sweet smell of melting chocolate. Sometimes he would even stand motionless outside the gates for several minutes on end, taking deep, swallowing breaths as though he were trying to eat the smell itself. "That child," said Grandpa Joe, poking his head from under the blanket one icy morning, "that child has got to have more food. It doesn't matter about us, we're too old to bother with, but a growing boy, he can't go on like this. He's beginning to look like a skeleton." "What can one do?" said Grandpa Josephine. "He refused to have any of ours. We hear his mother tried to slip her own piece of bread to him this morning at breakfast, but he wouldn't touch it. He made her take it back." "He's a fine fellow," said Grandpa George. "He deserves better than this." The cruel weather went on, and every day Charlie Bucket grew thinner and thinner. His face became frighteningly white and pinched. The skin was drawn so tightly over the cheeks you could see the shapes of the bones beneath. It seemed doubtful whether he could go much longer like this without becoming dangerously ill. Now, very calmly, with a cautious wisdom that seems to come so often to small children in times of hardship, he began to make little changes here and there in some of the things that he did, so as to save his strength. In the mornings when he left the house 10 minutes earlier so he could walk slowly to school without ever having to run, sat quietly in the classroom during break, resting himself, while the others rushed outdoors and threw snowballs and wrestled in the snow. Everything he did now, he did slowly and carefully to prevent exhaustion. Then one afternoon, walking back home with the icy wind in his face, and incidentally feeling hungrier than he'd ever felt before, his eye was caught suddenly by something silvery lying in the gutter in the snow. Charlie stepped off the curb and bent down to examine it. Part of it was buried under the snow, but he saw at once what it was. It was a 50-pence piece. Quickly, he looked around him. Had somebody just dropped it? No, that was impossible because of the way part of it was buried. Several people went hurrying past him on the pavement, their chins sunk deep into the collars of their coats, their feet crunching in the snow. None of them were searching for any money. None of them were making the slightest notice of the small boy crouching in the gutter. Then it was his, this 50-pence. Could he have it? Carefully, Charlie pulled out from under the snow. It was damp and dirty, but otherwise it was perfect. A whole 50-pence. He held it tightly between his shivering fingers and gazed down at it. It meant one thing to him at that moment, and only one thing. It meant food. Automatically, Charlie turned and began to walk slowly towards the nearest shop. It was only 10 paces away. It was a newspaper and stationery shop, the kind that sells almost everything, including sweets and cigars, and what he could do, he whispered quickly to himself. He could buy one luscious bar of chocolate and eat it all up, every single bit of it right there and there. The rest of the money he would take straight back home and give to his mother. Charlie entered the shop and laid the damp 50-pence onto the counter. "One Wonka's Whipple Scrumptious Fudge Mallow Delight," he said, remembering how much he loved that one on his birthday. The man behind the counter looked fat and well-fed. He had big lips and fat cheeks and a very fat neck. The fat around his neck bulged all around the top of his collar like a rubber ring. He turned and reached behind him for the chocolate bar, then turned back again and handed it to Charlie. Charlie grabbed it and quickly tore off the wrapper and took an enormous bite. Then he took another, and oh, the joy of being able to cram large pieces of something sweet and solid into one's mouth. The sheer blissful joy of being able to fill one's mouth with rich, solid food. "You look like you've waited for that one, Sonny," said the shopkeeper pleasantly. Charlie nodded, his mouth bulging with chocolate. The shopkeeper put Charlie's change on the counter. "Take it easy," he said. "It will give you a tummy ache if you swallow it like that without chewing." Charlie went on wolfing the chocolate. He couldn't stop. In less than half a minute, the whole thing had disappeared down his throat. He was quite out of breath and felt marvelously, extraordinarily happy. He reached out a hand to take the change. Then he paused. His eyes were just above the level of the counter. They were staring at the silver coins lying there. The coins were all 5-penny pieces. There were 9 of them. Surely it wouldn't matter if he spent just one more. I think, he said quietly, "I think I'll have just one more of those chocolate bars, the same kind as before, please." "Why not?" said the fat shopkeeper, reaching behind him once again and taking another chocolate bar from the shelf. He laid it on the counter. Charlie picked it up, tore off the wrapper, and suddenly from beneath the wrapper came a brilliant flash of gold. Charlie's heart stood still. "It's a golden ticket," screamed the shopkeeper, leaping a foot in the air. "You've got a golden ticket. You've found the last golden ticket. Hey, would you believe it? Come and look at this, everybody. The kid's found the Wonka's last golden ticket. Here it is, right here in his hand." as though the shopkeeper was going to have a fit himself. "In my shop too," he yelled. "He found it right here in my own little shop. Somebody call the newspapers quick and let them know. Watch it now, Sonny, don't tear it as you unwrap it. This thing is precious." In the next few seconds there was a crowd of around 20 people clustering around Charlie, and many more were even pushing their way from the street. Everybody wanted to get a look at the golden ticket and the lucky finder. "Where is it?" somebody shouted. "Hold it up so we can see it." "There it is, there," somebody else shouted. "He's holding it in his hands. See the gold shining?" "How did he manage to find it, I'd like to know," a large boy shouted angrily. 20 bars a day I've been buying for weeks and weeks." "Think of all the free stuff he's getting too," said another boy enviously. "A lifetime supply." "He'll need it, the skinny little shrimp," a girl said, laughing. Charlie hadn't moved. He hadn't even unwrapped the golden ticket from around the chocolate. He was standing very still, holding it tightly with both hands, while the crowd pushed and shouted all around him. He felt dizzy. There was a peculiar floating sensation coming over him, as though he were floating up in the air like a balloon. His feet didn't seem to be touching the ground at all. He could hear his heart thumping away loudly somewhere in his throat. At that point he became aware of a hand resting lightly on his shoulder, and when he looked up he saw a tall man standing over him. "Listen," said the man, "I'll buy it from you. I'll give you £50. How about it, eh? And I'll give you a new bicycle as well, okay?" "Are you crazy?" said the woman standing equally close. "Why, I'd give him £200 for that ticket. Do you want to sell that ticket for £200, young man?" "That's quite enough of that," said the fat shopkeeper, pushing his way through the crowd and taking Charlie firmly by the arm. "Leave the kid alone, will you? Make it there. Let him out." And to Charlie, as he led through to the door, he whispered, "Don't let anybody have it. Take it straight home quickly, before you lose it. Run all of the way and don't stop till you get there, you understand?" Charlie nodded. "You know something," said the shopkeeper, pausing for a moment and smiling at Charlie. "I have a feeling you needed a break like this. I'm awfully glad you found it. Good luck to you, Sonny." "Thank you," said Charlie, and off he went running through the snow as fast as his legs could go. As he flew past Willy Wonka's factory, he turned and waved at it and sang out, "I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you soon." And 5 minutes later he arrived back at his own home.